How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to the EducatedCollins Snap channel. We're going to be talking about Man Thing's first impressions. This is an interesting card. I think a lot of people were super happy about it when it comes out. Now we have it out and we can actually see how it plays, and a lot of them are thoughts. So a lot to talk about in this card. I think it's an interesting card that could definitely see some changes as the meta progresses, but let's get started. All right, so let's take a look at Man Thing, right? So we can see he's a 4 energy, 5 power card with the ability ongoing 1, 2, and 3 cost cards have -2 power. So that's pretty enticing. If the opponent has like a couple 1-drops, a couple early game cards, you could really hamper their game plan. You can really hamper their style. There's issues with Luke Cage. So if your opponent is playing Luke Cage, well, this doesn't work, right? So there are some counter plays. There's an ongoing card, so you can Enchantress it, etc., etc. But overall, if your opponent isn't doing anything to really deal with it, this has a pretty powerful, pretty menacing effect. There is like some thoughts of like how often do people play multiple 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops in a deck, and also in the same lane? Not that often. So usually you're going to be hitting 1. If your opponent is like not caring, then maybe 2. 3 early game, not very likely. As soon as you play, you're not going to play more 1-drops in there. So there is some downsides in that your opponent doesn't really want to play in a way that you can really fully utilize Man Thing, but you can force their hand essentially with some synergies. But overall, does synergize in things like junk decks. So junk decks like to put cards in your opponent's field and you can stack it. So even cards like Titania, right, normally pretty bad, but you play it into a Man Thing, it's 3 power, not that bad. Green Goblin's a fantastic synergy card here. You have things like Debris, you have things like Viper, so you can easily stack a lane, and Man Thing can say, hey, I win this for sure. So that's a lot of power in that particular circumstance. Zabu as well. Any 4-drops, you always have to think about Zabu. You play Zabu, you can play this on 3. That's a pretty good swing on 3. Now, keep in mind, a lot of people still run Mobius, so that has some downsides in that you're not going to be always able to do that, but it is an option that is available. High Evolutionary, this is nice because it synergizes with Abomination. So Abomination gets cheaper every time your opponent has a card that has been taxed or reduced power, and Man Thing can easily apply that pretty consistently. So you can definitely get cheaper Abominations if you're playing with there. And Anti-Flood, so a lot of people have been playing Elsa decks playing Hitmonkey, also decks playing Mysterio, also decks playing a lot of very cheap cards. It would be nice if it also had include 0-cost cards. That would be pretty. I mean, I don't think it's a big deal, but that would be nice as well. And anytime people are playing like Mysterio and stuff, they always fill a lane, so you can always get that effect. So there's definitely some good synergies with this card in the meta right now, but there are some downsides that we have talked about. So overall, when it comes to should you buy this card, should you not, my current opinion right now is that it's definitely not worth spotlights, and I wouldn't jump the gun on buying it with tokens right now. So in terms of spotlights, we'll go over the spotlights section it's in, but I just don't think it's a Series 4 card, and any Series 4 cards you have to be really selective in like buying it for spotlights, because you could always just get it for tokens for half off essentially, right? And I would say this isn't worth, or the cards is next to isn't worth committing on a spotlight. If you're missing all 3 cards, then maybe that's more of a drive to spend your spotlights. But unless you're in that particular position, I really wouldn't spend your spotlights here. I think it's a much better use of tokens. However, don't think it's worth tokens right now. Now, the case is that there's not many meta decks to play him with at the moment. So he's in an awkward spot in that he's a 4-drop, so you want to play him with Zabu, but Zabu gets nerfed right now in this Mobius meta. You want to play him with Junk, but you don't really need him in Junk, and you don't really want to build around this card because it's not a win condition card, right? So there are some cards that you could build around. Hey, if I get Tribunal off, I win, or if I get Hello off, I win. Where here, if you get this card off, a lot of times it's a 4-7, a 4-9. You know, a 4-9 is great, but it doesn't win you the game. It's not something to write home about. You can't say, "Oh, my deck is built around getting a 4/9 off, and then I win because I have a 4/9." No, you don't. You don't win. So it's not a card that you really want to like devote a lot of your resources on making it work consistently. And that's really the issue here. Where a lot of decks where if they get their combo off, they're getting like 20 plus power on the board. Like they're getting huge swings. Where if you get this combo off, you got 4/9, like you got 4/11 at best, right? So not really a meta defining card right now. And I would just wait until maybe a more particular, more influential time you can really play him, or you see like the meta is really just gravitating towards him automatically. So maybe in Annihilus, one of the new cards coming out soon, that might affect how much people are playing, things that Man Thing can really affect. But right now in this current climate, I wouldn't really like jump the gun and buy him. So it's nice for him to be a Series 4 because I do think it's a card you eventually want in your collection. However, as a Series 4, you can wait, right? You just have to wait until it opens up, it shows up in a shop that you buy with tokens. So you don't have to, you're not forced to get it like you are in Spotlight. So you can definitely wait. That's one of the nice things about tokens. So I would just do that. I would wait, see if the meta really wants you to play the card, and when it does, then I would jump the gun and get it. So right now, I wouldn't get it at all. I just don't think it's worth your spotlights. I don't think it's worth your tokens. So I would just wait. Just wait a couple weeks or months and see if eventually a meta comes out where this is a really core concept, a really core card. And if that's the case, then I would go get it. So, but right now, not the case. Wouldn't do it. Not that important. Now, let's go over through the spotlights. Let's go over through the actual deck build. So here we do have Man Thing, blah, blah, blah. We already talked about him. In terms of the spotlights here, so I did do the spotlight tier review. I said if you had if you're missing all three, it's a B tier card, or B tier spotlight. So if you get all three, 1,500 tokens, not bad. However, I just think there are better cards to get. Silver Samurai is not bad. Lady Deathstrike's not bad. However, Lady Deathstrike's in another spotlight, which I think is a little bit more enticing. And the Silver Samurai isn't really used in the meta right now. It's not a bad card, but it's not like super meta. And then Manta, you can just get with tokens. So, not that enticing overall of a selection to get. So, it's just hard to say, yeah, you have to get this. Yeah, this is super important. It's not. So, if you're missing one C tier, if you're only getting a spotlight for Man Thing, don't do it. So that's my thoughts on the spotlight. Hasn't really changed since I made this, which is good because you don't want to make something and be like, a week later it was wrong. Still agree with this in essence. However, if you did get it, if you still want to play with this card, I do have some deck ideas to run with this card. So first one we have. Oh, I didn't. That reminds me. I didn't talk about the synergies. Let's do that real quick. Actually, let me go right back. Let's talk about some of the synergies. That's me again. So here we have some of the synergistic cards. So I have Evolutionary, pretty powerful. Lets you play Abomination. Works with the vibe of this deck, and like you can play Luke Cage, you can play Hazmat, you can play Scorpion. There's a lot of good synergies there. So, but the real key is Abomination that you get big payoff with. But yeah, definitely an option. Viper, you can throw out cheap cards, give it to your opponent, make it reduce. The Hood is really popular, really common. That's a really easy answer. That's something you can do. A lot of these cards have that same effect, right? Debris, same thing. Polaris, same-ish thing. The nice thing about Polaris is you can move their 2-drop to their 1-drop. You can move their 2-drop to their 3-drop and then double up on the value, right? So that's the synergy there. Green Goblin, you turn Green Goblin to a -5, which is very strong. So that is a really enticing combo, -5 type of power. You can that's a lot to win a lane by itself, right? You play Green Goblin Man Thing, they have to really invest to compete with that. Spectrum, Man Thing's ongoing, so you can make an ongoing deck with Spectrum as a finisher. A lot of people have been doing that right now with Howard the Duck, right? With Debris. Howard the Duck not debris, how to duck Jubilee as like a combo. We have a deck build with that in there, so that's something you can do. And then Lady Deathstrike is just an easy, I can kill everything. It doesn't, your Lady Deathstrike doesn't hit the man thing, but you can pretty much hit all of your cheaper cards they've played in that lane. So if you really like playing man thing, you like destroying cards, that's something you can do. It's a big investment to win one lane. That's my criticism here, where you're spending a 4 and a 5 to win a lane, but it definitely works if you like doing that kind of thing. All right, next up, we could finally go back and we can look at some of the deck builds with this card. So this isn't necessarily a bad card, a bad deck, or anything like that. My criteria is just wait until like a more fleshed out meta where you can fully be confident about the purchase comes through. But in terms of decks to play with this card, first one is just a Zabu list. I think this is very likely to play this. If you're playing this, you really want to take advantage of the fact that it's a 4-drop, and then you can play a lot of 4-cost cards with the Zabu. Right? You have the Luke Cage, you've got the Rogue in case of the Mobius counter, and you can just kind of play the cards you want. So I wouldn't say this is like a bad deck, right? It's just not like, it's not crazy. That's my criticism. It doesn't like auto win, or there's no like, here you do this and you auto win, or if you draw these cards you auto win anything. There's nothing like that. It's just like you just have to play well, play your Shang-Chi in the right time, play your Rogue in the right time, Darkhawk combos very well, but it's not like a super crazy deck in the meta, anything like that. Next up, we have the High Evolutionary deck. Now, there's lots of different ways to play High Evolutionary, especially with Abomination. With particular cards, you don't have to go Hazmat, you don't have to go, Rogue or anything like that. There's definitely a lot of ways to do it. However, this is just a consistent deck if you like playing Man Thing. The Rogue sometimes could be safe for a Luke Cage if you're playing like a Mirror or something like that. It's not always for Mobius or anything of those qualities, so you just have to be careful, but has a lot of good synergies. If you can get the Man Thing off in the right lanes, in the right scenarios, you can really do a lot of work, right? So Scorpion usually will hit like high tier cards, so Man Thing can kind of hit their low tier cards, so you can have a really cheap Abomination, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the idea here with this type of deck. Not anything fancy, once again, but that's kind of the criteria, right? You can't really play Elsa with Man Thing. It doesn't really fit that well. You could, I mean, you could play Elsa with anything, but it doesn't fit that well in like the theme of an Elsa deck or anything like that. And a lot of the meta decks, Silky Smooth, anything like that, they're not really Man Thing synergistic in essence. So it's hard to really just say, hey, Man Thing, you could put it everything. I really don't feel that's the case. And you kind of have to have a deck that already does what Man Thing wants to do, and then just have an extra tool. Next up, we have just a junk deck. So nice thing about junk is that you get to play a lot of cards that Man Thing can really take advantage of. You get to play Green Goblin, you get to play Hood Viper, you get to play Debris, you get to play Polaris. All right, so you really, even Titania, if you get lucky and it goes to the other side, can do something for you. So there's definitely a lot of synergies with a Man Thing deck in junk. You just have to play it a little bit smart, because you have to be thinking ahead, right? You have to be like, oh, I'm playing Man Thing in this lane. Okay, how do I set that up so that it does a lot of work for me? Right? So there's definitely a lot of effort in this particular deck, but it has the tools you need to win if you want. So Vision Alliance definitely are very strong end game cards if you can just set up your early game, which you should be able to with some of the early tools that you do have. So that's definitely archetype you can play, a fun archetype. Definitely think junk is going to be having a resurgence in the next couple months, since a lot of cards coming out that are pretty strong for this. But yeah, definitely something you can play, try out, see if you like this type of deck building. And the last one I have, I believe, is like a funky, not funky, but like a deck that has been like jumping up or getting more played. It's a deck with Howard the Duck, right? And it's a Howard the Duck that takes advantage of like Jubilee Iron Lad. Usually this one doesn't run it, it's running Wong. But you can with Howard, right, the Jubilee does is more consistent. The Iron Lad is more consistent, so you can definitely take advantage of that. And a lot of the cards just do really well into Spectrum. So that's the idea here. You get to do Spectrum as a finisher with Wong, or you get to do Hazmat as a finisher with Wong. So you have different tools, and then Rogue can deal with some of the bad counter matchups that you might be getting into. So that's the idea with this deck. There's definitely more versions of this deck in the meta right now, but this is one that fits with Man Thing pretty well. So I wanted to showcase that list. But yeah, overall, in terms of Man Thing, I don't think the card is bad or anything like that. Like, I'm not saying, hey, Man Thing is bad, you shouldn't get it. I'm just thinking from a realistic standpoint, and I just don't think there's any reason that you have to buy Man Thing, right? Because you do want to be selective with your resources. I would say your tokens aren't utilized that heavily in acquisition right now, but you still want to be careful. And with tokens, you can be slow. You can be like a month behind and still be fine, because it's not like the price are changing. It's 3K tokens, right? So you can just wait until the meta is like, yeah, you have to get Man Thing right now. And right now that's not the case. So you could just wait, see if a meta changes and it's like, okay, you now you need it, then get it. But I think it's a good card. I just don't think the meta right now suits Man Thing in particular, and there's no rush to get it. So those are like the two reasons why I would say, even though it's a good card, I would wait on getting the card in particular. So that's my thoughts on Man Thing. What are your thoughts? Do you disagree? Do you think, oh, this is super good in the meta right now? Let me know. And take care of yourselves and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Educated Collins snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skills will be improved.